What happens when love, once the heartbeat of your world, suddenly disappears? The silence left behind is louder than any scream, and it echoes deep inside. This is the story of a woman who once believed in forever. Every smile, every touch, every word from her lover became the rhythm of her life. But when that love slipped away, she was left with nothing but emptiness. The silence in her chest feels unbearable, as if her heart still beats but without sound, without meaning. Nights become heavy, days turn gray, and memories twist into haunting shadows. She tries to breathe, but each breath feels stolen by the absence of the one she loved. Silent Heartbeats is not just a song, it's a mirror for anyone who has loved deeply and lost painfully. Stay with this story, and you'll see how silence can become the loudest reminder of a broken heart. The beginning of her heartbreak was not sudden, it unfolded like a slow, painful unraveling of something she thought would last forever. In the past, her heart was full, every beat synchronized with the presence of someone who gave her a reason to smile every morning and a sense of peace every night. His voice was the soundtrack of her days, his laughter the rhythm that carried her through storms. She never questioned the permanence of that love. To her, forever was not just a promise, it was a truth she carried with certainty. But when love slipped away, it left a void so vast that it felt physical. She would place her hand on her chest, expecting to feel the same comfort, the same steady rhythm of warmth. Instead, all she felt was silence, a silence that was louder than noise, sharper than any scream, because it reminded her of absence. Her heart was still beating, yes, but without melody, without meaning. The early days of loss are often the hardest. Every corner of her home reminded her of him, the way he sat by the window with coffee, the spot on the couch where he would lean into her shoulder, the subtle scent of his cologne still lingering on the sheets. These small, ordinary details became piercing reminders of what was gone. The world outside seemed to move on, but inside, she felt paralyzed, trapped in the very moment he left. She tried to convince herself it was temporary, that maybe the silence would fade or maybe he would return. She replayed old messages, listened to saved voicemails, just to hear his voice again. Her heart begged for hope, even while her mind whispered the truth. He wasn't coming back. What made it worse was the contrast between then and now. The warmth that used to flood her life was now replaced with cold emptiness. The rhythm that once gave her comfort was replaced with broken patterns of breath and tears. This is why she describes it as silent heartbeats. Because her heart did not stop beating, it kept going, but without the sound of love, without the energy that used to fill it. Losing love feels like losing a part of yourself. She didn't just lose him, she lost the version of herself that existed only when he was around. That's why the silence hurt so much. It wasn't just about missing him, it was about missing who she was when she was loved. This first stage of her journey is a raw, painful awakening. It's the moment when she realizes that forever can end, and when it does, it leaves behind not only loneliness, but also a haunting silence inside. And in that silence, every heartbeat feels heavy, hollow, and broken. After the initial shock of losing him, she found herself drifting through life like a ghost. Days blended into nights, and nights into endless hours of staring at the ceiling, waiting for sleep that rarely came. The world around her kept moving. Cars passed by, people laughed, seasons changed, but inside her, time had stopped. It was as if her life had been paused on the very moment he walked away. Everyday tasks that once felt so simple became unbearably heavy. Making coffee in the morning reminded her of how he used to smile while sipping his. Walking to work meant passing by places they had once visited together. Even something as routine as grocery shopping triggered memories of arguments over what snacks to buy, which now seemed painfully sweet compared to the emptiness she carried in her cart. Her friends noticed the change. They tried to pull her out of the fog, inviting her to dinners, sending messages filled with encouragement. "You'll get through this," they said. But no matter how well-intentioned, their words felt like echoes bouncing off walls she couldn't break. They didn't understand that her loss wasn't just emotional, it was physical. Her heart genuinely hurt, like an invisible weight pressing down on her chest. Each night, as she lay in bed, the silence of the room became unbearable. It was not the peaceful kind of silence, but the suffocating kind that amplifies every lonely thought. She would press her hand against her chest, feeling her heartbeat slow, tired, and empty. It was alive, but it didn't feel like living. It felt like surviving. The rhythm of her life had always been tied to him. His presence dictated her energy, her laughter, her stability. Without him, her days had no rhythm, no color. Music sounded flat, food tasted bland, even the sun felt dimmer. She was existing, yes, but not truly living. It was as though the world had drained of meaning, leaving behind only routines she forced herself to go through, just to keep appearances. She tried to distract herself with work, filling her calendar with meetings and tasks, but even productivity couldn't hide the emptiness. Every achievement felt hollow. Every compliment from colleagues felt undeserved, because deep down she was aware of the truth. She was just moving her body through life while her spirit stayed behind in the past. Silent heartbeats became her reality. Her heart continued its natural rhythm, but it was no longer guided by joy, passion, or love. The soundless beats were a reminder that she was alive in the technical sense, yet emotionally frozen. Her life wasn't destroyed in flames, it was smothered in silence. This stage of her journey reflects how grief is not always about dramatic tears or loud cries. Sometimes, grief is the quiet halting of life, the invisible pause button pressed on someone's existence. She wasn't dead, but she wasn't living either. She was trapped in the limbo of a heart that beat without a song to follow. Grief has a way of sneaking into the smallest corners of life, and for her, it came through memories that refused to fade. Each day felt like walking through a museum of their love. Every object, every place, every sound carried echoes of him. Instead of fading, the memories grew sharper, haunting her with an almost cruel intensity. At night, when the world grew quiet, she would lie awake, and that was when the ghosts of the past became loudest. She could still hear his laughter in her mind, the cadence of his voice, the way he used to say her name. These weren't just thoughts, they felt real, like his presence lingered in the shadows. She often reached for her phone, hoping to find a message she had missed, a call she hadn't answered, but the screen remained dark, and the silence screamed back at her. Her apartment became a shrine of reminders. A half-empty bottle of his cologne still sat on the dresser. A photograph of them smiling together hung on the wall, and though she tried once to take it down, she couldn't. Her hands trembled, and her chest tightened, as if erasing that image meant erasing a part of herself. So the picture stayed, and with it, the pain of knowing that the moment it captured would never return. Even ordinary places turned into battlegrounds of emotion. Passing the cafe where they had their first date would flood her with memories so vivid that she had to stop and catch her breath. Walking down the street they once held hands on felt like walking alongside a phantom. She didn't need a reminder, her heart carried the weight of those moments constantly, but the world around her seemed determined to keep twisting the knife. She often asked herself, why do the good memories hurt more than the bad ones? Arguments, misunderstandings, disappointments, those faded quickly. But the moments of joy, the little gestures of love, clung to her like scars. It was as if her mind wanted to torture her by replaying the best parts of what she had lost, over and over again. These haunting memories blurred the line between past and present. Sometimes she would wake up from a dream where he was still beside her, only to open her eyes and face the crushing emptiness of reality. The contrast was brutal, like falling from a warm embrace into cold, endless silence. This stage of her grief was not about denial, it was about being trapped in the grip of what once was. She wasn't pretending he might come back, she knew the truth. But the memories refused to let her move forward. They were beautiful and devastating, a bittersweet poison she couldn't stop drinking. And so, her heartbeats remained silent, muffled by echoes of laughter, words, and touches that only existed in the past. The silence wasn't just the absence of him, it was filled with the ghosts of everything he left behind. There comes a moment in grief when denial fades, and reality pierces the heart with a sharp, undeniable truth. For her, that moment was the painful realization that forever wasn't real. The promises they once whispered under the stars, the vows of never letting go, all dissolved into nothing more than fragile words, easily broken, easily forgotten. She had once built her future on those promises. She imagined a life together, a home filled with laughter, children running through the halls, growing old side by side. That vision had been her anchor, the reason she endured storms and held on to hope. But now, standing alone in the ruins of what once felt eternal, she understood that forever was just a word, not a guarantee. The realization was crushing, not because she hadn't known that relationships could end, but because she truly believed theirs was unbreakable. She had placed her trust, her faith, and her entire heart into his hands. To lose him was one thing, to realize that everything she believed in was built on sand was another. It shattered not just her love, but her worldview. Memories that once felt comforting now turned into reminders of betrayal. She remembered the way he said, "I'll always be here." She could still picture the seriousness in his eyes when he promised, "We're forever." And now, those words felt like lies etched into her soul, replaying over and over with every heartbeat. What hurt most was not just losing him, it was losing the innocence of believing that love could conquer all. That kind of hope doesn't die quietly, it burns out, leaving ashes in its place. And she felt those ashes in her chest, heavy and suffocating, each one a reminder that forever had ended long before she was ready. This awareness didn't come all at once. It was a gradual unraveling. Each day she woke up without his presence, each message left unanswered, each empty night confirmed the truth more deeply. He was gone, and their love was no longer alive. She stopped waiting for him to return. She stopped expecting closure. Instead, she learned to live with the hollow ache of finality. The bitterness of this stage was not about anger, it was about mourning a dream. She wasn't just grieving the loss of a person, she was grieving the loss of the life she thought she would have, the certainty she thought she possessed. And that kind of grief is cruel, because it forces you to let go not just of someone, but of a version of yourself who once believed in magic. Her heart still beat, but now it carried scars instead of hope. And in those silent heartbeats, she carried the truth. Love may promise forever, but forever is not always promised back. When grief settles into the soul, it doesn't just stay as sadness, it transforms into a heavy burden that weighs down every breath. For her, this burden was constant. It lived in her chest, in the heaviness of her steps, in the hollowness of her smile. Every morning she woke up, she carried the same invisible weight. The pain of knowing love had once filled her heart, only to leave her in silence. She described it as carrying scars no one else could see. To the outside world, she looked functional. She went to work, spoke to friends, and performed her duties. But beneath the surface, she was bleeding in ways words could never capture. Each interaction felt like wearing a mask, concealing the truth that she was breaking inside. The mask was exhausting, but it was easier than explaining a pain that no one could fix. The nights were the hardest. In the quiet, she could no longer distract herself. The silence pressed against her ears until she could hear only the faint, painful rhythm of her own heartbeat. It was proof she was alive, yet it also reminded her of everything she had lost. Those beats felt empty, like echoes in a hollow room, silent, meaningless, and stripped of the joy that once gave them purpose. This stage of her grief turned into self-reflection. She asked herself difficult questions. Am I broken forever? Will I ever love again? Or will every heartbeat remind me of him? The uncertainty was cruel, because the pain made her believe that her heart was permanently damaged. Even if she wanted to open herself to love in the future, she feared she would never feel the same way again. Love had left scars, and she wasn't sure they would ever heal. The burden also shaped the way she moved through life. She became more cautious, less trusting. She avoided places that reminded her of him, avoided conversations that touched on love. But no matter how much she tried to protect herself, the memories and the pain found ways to return. It was like walking with a shadow that refused to leave. Yet, in this heaviness, there was also resilience. She carried her scars as proof of survival. Though the pain silenced her heartbeats, she was still here, still breathing, still enduring. She realized that grief was not about erasing love, but about learning to live with its absence. The scars didn't mean weakness, they meant she had loved deeply, and that love, though lost, had shaped her forever. Her journey at this stage was not about finding closure, but about accepting the weight she carried. The silent heartbeats were no longer just a reminder of loss, they became a part of her identity. She was someone who had known love, who had lost it, and who now carried its memory in every breath. The burden was painful, but it was also proof. Even in silence, her heart had endured. As time moved forward, she began to realize that grief does not vanish, it transforms. The silence in her chest, the quiet rhythm of her heart, became less of a scream and more of a companion. She understood that the pain of losing him would never disappear completely, but it could teach her something about herself. In those long, empty nights, she started to reflect. What did it mean to love someone so deeply that their absence could silence your very heart? At first, she thought it meant weakness that she had lost herself in him, but slowly she saw it differently. It wasn't weakness, but proof of her capacity to love without limits. And though that love was gone, the truth of what she gave remained. Acceptance didn't come like a lightning strike. It came in small moments, when she could walk past their favorite cafe without breaking down, when she could listen to a song they once shared and feel a bittersweet smile instead of a flood of tears. Healing was not about forgetting him, but about remembering without being destroyed by the memory. The silence in her chest became symbolic. At first, it was the sound of emptiness, of a heart broken beyond repair. But over time, she began to see it as space, an open room for her to grow, to breathe, to eventually rebuild. The absence of his love left her with scars, yes, but also with strength she hadn't known she had. Her reflections often circled back to the word forever. She had once believed forever meant holding on, never letting go. But now, she saw that forever could also mean carrying someone in your heart, even when they're no longer by your side. Love changes, but it doesn't vanish. It reshapes into memories, lessons, and the quiet courage to continue living. She knew her heart would never love the same way again, but perhaps that was okay. Maybe love isn't meant to be repeated, it's meant to be unique, irreplaceable. The scars she carried were not signs of being broken, but reminders of a chapter that shaped her story. Her silent heartbeats were not proof of emptiness anymore, they were proof of survival. In the end, she learned that grief is not an enemy but a teacher. It shows you the depth of your love, the fragility of life, and the resilience of the human spirit. She would never erase the silence left behind, but she could choose how to live with it, and in that choice, she found a fragile kind of peace. Her story doesn't end with joy or reunion, it ends with acceptance. Silent heartbeats still echo in her chest, but now they remind her not of what she lost, but of how deeply she once loved, and how strongly she has endured. In the end, Silent Heartbeats is more than a song about heartbreak. It's a reflection of what it means to love deeply and lose painfully. Her journey reminds us that silence can be just as loud as sound, and absence can weigh heavier than presence. Through grief, she discovered not only the depth of her scars but also the quiet strength to carry them. Silent heartbeats are not the end. They are proof that even in silence, the heart keeps going. They remind us that survival is its own kind of victory, and acceptance is not about forgetting but about living with the echoes of what once was. If you've ever loved and lost, you know this silence too. The question is, how do we live with it? What about you? Have you ever felt your own silent heartbeats? Share your story in the comments, and let's heal together through music and words.